The afternoon sky hung heavy with clouds and the air smelled of rain. People hurried through the city streets, umbrellas bumping against one another as thunder grumbled in the distance. Cars splashed through puddles and the sidewalks glistened like mirrors. Among the crowd was a man named Daniel, his jacket damp, boots muddy from a long day at the repair shop where he worked. His hands were stained with oil, his back ached, but his heart was light. He had just finished fixing an old customer's car who couldn't afford to pay him in full, but he didn't mind. He liked helping people. That's just the kind of man he was. As he walked toward the bus stop, Daniel noticed a woman standing under the edge of the shelter, clutching her bag to her chest. Her dark hair was wet, sticking to her face, and her coat, though elegant, was soaked. She looked out of place, not because of how she looked, but because of how lost she seemed. People walked past her without even a glance. Daniel might have done the same if she hadn't spoken first. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you know if the number 12 bus already passed?" Daniel turned toward her. "I think it's running late. The rain's slowing everything down," he said, giving a small smile. She nodded, glancing at the road. "I was supposed to catch it 20 minutes ago," she murmured. "And of course, today of all days, I forgot my wallet at home." Daniel chuckled quietly. "Bad luck always finds us on the worst days." She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. There was something about her, a mix of exhaustion and calm dignity, that caught Daniel's attention. He hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills. "Here," he said, offering the money. "Bus fare. You can pay me back if we ever meet again." Her eyes widened. "Oh, no, I couldn't. That's very kind, but—" "Come on," he said, cutting her off gently. "It's just bus money. And it looks like you really need to get somewhere." She stared at the bills in his hand, uncertain. "You don't even know me," she said softly. Daniel shrugged. "You look like someone who's having a rough day." "That's enough for me." For a moment she hesitated again, glancing at the money as if it were something precious. Then she reached out slowly and took it. "Thank you," she whispered. "I really appreciate it," Daniel smiled. "No problem." They stood there in silence for a while, watching the rain. The woman's phone buzzed, but she ignored it. She looked distracted, like her mind was far away. Finally, the bus headlights appeared through the rain. She turned to Daniel and smiled again, this time more genuinely. "Thank you, really," she said as she stepped toward the bus. "You've helped more than you know." Daniel nodded. "Take care of yourself." She climbed onto the bus, disappearing behind foggy windows. Daniel didn't think much of it after that. He walked home, soaked to the bone, thinking only of a warm shower and maybe a hot meal if he could afford takeout that night. He didn't even notice that the woman on the bus kept glancing back at him through the window until the bus turned the corner, and he was gone. That night, Daniel sat at his small kitchen table eating instant noodles. His apartment was small. One bedroom, a single couch, and a flickering light in the hallway that he kept meaning to fix. He thought briefly about the woman from the bus stop. Something about her face stayed in his mind. Maybe it was the look of gratitude, or maybe it was the way she'd said, "You don't even know me." He smiled faintly to himself, not realizing that this tiny act of kindness would change everything in his life. The next morning, Daniel woke up early as usual. The rain had cleared, leaving the air fresh and cool. He put on his worn-out boots and headed to the garage. Business was slow, as always, but he kept busy repairing an old van for a local delivery driver. Around noon, his coworker called in sick, so Daniel worked alone. He didn't complain. Hard work never scared him. Around lunchtime, a familiar voice startled him. "I owe you something." Daniel looked up and saw her. The woman from the bus stop was standing near the garage door. She looked completely different. Her hair was dry and styled neatly, and she wore a light gray coat that probably cost more than his entire month's rent. She held a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a small envelope in the other. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Hey," he said, smiling. "You found me," she smiled back. "I promised to return your money, didn't I?" He chuckled. "You really didn't have to. It was just a couple of dollars." "I know," she said, stepping closer. "But it mattered to me." She handed him the envelope. Inside was a $20 bill, far more than he had given her. Daniel shook his head. "That's too much," she laughed softly. "Call it interest," he looked at her, curious. "So did you make it home all right that day?" "I did," she said. "And you have no idea how much your kindness meant." That day was difficult. I'd had a long meeting and everything that could go wrong did. Losing my wallet was just the final straw. Daniel nodded. Happens to the best of us. They talked for a few minutes and Daniel found her surprisingly easy to talk to. She wasn't proud or distant. She asked him about his work, and he told her how he'd been fixing cars since he was 16. She listened, genuinely interested. When she left, she thanked him again and he found himself watching her walk away, feeling something warm he hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few days, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He didn't even know her name. That small moment at the bus stop had left a strange imprint on him. Maybe it was her kindness, or maybe it was her mystery. She didn't look like someone from his world. Everything about her seemed polished, refined. But she had spoken to him like an equal, not like someone beneath her. A week later, fate played its strange hand again. Daniel stopped at a small cafe near the bus station to grab a cup of coffee before work. The bell over the door chimed as he entered, and when he looked around, he froze. There she was, sitting alone by the window, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She looked lost in thought. He hesitated for a moment before walking over. "You're becoming a regular in my week," he said with a grin. She looked up, surprised, and then smiled warmly. "Daniel, right?" He blinked. "You remember my name?" "I saw it on your uniform the other day," she said, nodding toward the embroidered patch on his jacket. "May I join you?" he asked. "Please do." He sat down across from her. "So what brings you here?" She laughed lightly. "Same as everyone else, I guess." Coffee, quiet, and a little break from the chaos. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I know that feeling." They talked for nearly an hour. She told him her name was Elena. She worked in management, though she didn't say much more than that. Daniel didn't push. He wasn't the kind to pry. They talked about simple things. The rain, the city, small moments that made life a bit easier to bear. There was a calmness to their conversation, a rhythm that made time slip away unnoticed. When she finally glanced at her watch, she gasped. "Oh, I'm late for a meeting." Daniel smiled. Well, at least the coffee was worth it. She stood up, gathering her things. It was, and so was the company. After she left, Daniel sat there for a while, smiling to himself like a fool. Something about Elena made the world feel lighter. He didn't know who she really was, and he didn't care. All he knew was that when she was around, he felt seen. Not as the broke mechanic with grease-stained hands, but as a man who mattered. Days turned into weeks. Sometimes Elena would stop by the cafe, and if Daniel was lucky, he'd run into her. Other times, she'd drop by the garage with coffee for both of them, claiming she was in the area. They talked more and more, sharing pieces of their lives. She told him she lived alone in a quiet apartment uptown. He told her about his parents, who had passed away when he was younger. She listened with gentle eyes, never judging, never pitying, just listening. Daniel noticed that Elena never really talked about her work. Whenever the topic came up, she changed it with a laugh or a vague answer. He didn't push it. Everyone had their secrets, and whatever hers were, they didn't matter to him. He liked her for who she was, kind, thoughtful, and real. One evening, as the city lights shimmered against the wet streets, Daniel walked her to the bus stop. The air was cool, and the hum of cars filled the silence between them. He wanted to tell her something. Maybe that he liked her, maybe that he was glad they met, but the words stuck in his throat. "You know," she said suddenly, "that day you gave me money." It wasn't just about the bus fare. Daniel looked at her, curious. "What do you mean?" She smiled softly. "It reminded me that there are still good people out there. People who help without expecting anything." He chuckled. "Well, if you ever forget again, I'll lend you bus money anytime." She laughed, the sound soft and genuine. "I'll keep that in mind." When her bus arrived, she turned to him, hesitating. "Would you like to grab dinner sometime?" "My treat," Daniel blinked, surprised. "Dinner?" "Yes, to thank you." "Properly this time." He smiled, trying to hide how happy that made him. "I'd like that." As the bus pulled away, Daniel stood there watching her go, the smile still lingering on his face. He had no idea that Elena wasn't just some ordinary woman working in an office. She was the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the city, a fact she kept hidden because for once she wanted to be seen for who she truly was, not for her title or wealth. But for now, none of that mattered. All Daniel knew was that his small act of kindness had led him to someone who made the world feel different, warmer, brighter. That night, he lay awake in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling. He didn't have much, not money, not status, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like life was giving him something good. Something real. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for sure. He wanted to see Elena again. The following week, the city seemed to move slower. The rain had stopped, and the cold had given way to mild sunlight that made the streets look alive again. Daniel walked to work early, as he always did, but this time his thoughts weren't on engines or bills. They were on Elena. He couldn't stop replaying the moment she asked him to dinner. Her voice, calm but sincere, had echoed in his head every night since. He didn't know where she planned to take him or what to expect, but he didn't care. For the first time in a long while, he felt nervous in a good way. He stood in front of his mirror that Friday evening, fixing the collar of his only decent shirt. It wasn't new, but it was clean. He'd even ironed it that morning before leaving for work. His reflection looked tired but hopeful. He smiled to himself, grabbed his jacket, and headed out. They had agreed to meet at a small restaurant not far from the city square. When Daniel arrived, he almost turned around. The place looked far too elegant for someone like him. The soft lights, the quiet music, the scent of fresh flowers at every table. It wasn't the kind of place he was used to. But then he saw her sitting by the window, waving him over with that familiar warm smile, and suddenly everything else faded away. "You came," she said, standing up to greet him. "Of course," he replied, smiling. "I wouldn't miss it," she laughed softly. "I was worried you might change your mind." "I thought about it," he admitted. "But then I realized I'd regret it forever if I did." Her eyes softened. "I'm glad you didn't." They sat down and the waiter brought menus. Daniel glanced at the prices and felt his throat tighten. He wasn't used to numbers like those. But before he could say anything, Elena reached across the table and smiled. "Tonight, you're my guest. Don't even think about the bill." He chuckled. "You make it sound like I'd fight you for it." "I think you would," she said teasingly. "You seem like the kind of man who insists on paying even when he can't afford it." Daniel laughed. "You're not wrong." As the evening went on, the awkwardness faded. They talked about everything and nothing. The way the city looked after rain, the smell of old books, how people rush through life without noticing small moments. Daniel found himself telling her stories from his childhood, about the summers he spent fixing bikes in his neighborhood, about the old man who taught him how to repair engines. She listened with genuine interest, laughing at the funny parts, asking questions like she wanted to know every detail. At one point, Daniel looked around the restaurant and said, "You don't seem like someone who belongs in a place like this either." She tilted her head, curious. "What makes you say that?" "You seem too down to earth," he said simply. "Like you'd rather eat street food than sit under fancy lights." She laughed softly. "You're not wrong again." Her laughter carried warmth, but behind her eyes, Daniel noticed something else, something she was hiding. There was a flicker of loneliness, the kind that comes from living too fast, too high for too long. He didn't ask about it. He just smiled and said, "Then next time, I'll take you somewhere better. No candles, no waiters, just good food and people who smile for real." "I'd like that," she said. After dinner, they walked together under the city lights. The streets were quieter now, the sound of footsteps echoing softly. Elena shivered slightly, and without thinking, Daniel took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him, surprised. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said. They walked in silence for a few moments before she spoke again. "You know, I almost didn't come tonight." "Why not?" "I thought maybe it wasn't a good idea." "We come from different worlds," Daniel smiled. "Maybe. But maybe that's what makes this interesting." She looked at him for a long moment and then smiled too. "You're different, Daniel." "I get that a lot," he said jokingly. When they reached the corner where their paths separated, she turned to him. "Thank you. For tonight, I should be thanking you," he said, "for inviting me." "Still," she said softly, "it meant more than you think." Daniel wanted to ask what she meant, but she waved goodbye before he could. He watched her walk away, his heart heavier and lighter all at once. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Elena and Daniel began to see each other more often. Sometimes they met for coffee before work. Sometimes they walked along the river after sunset. They talked about life, dreams, and disappointments. Daniel told her about his hope to one day open his own repair shop. Helena listened carefully, asking questions that made him think deeper about his future. "What would you name it?" she asked one evening. He thought for a moment. "Something simple. Maybe Honest Hands. My dad used to say that a man's hands tell his story." "I like that," she smiled. "It suits you." Daniel had started to notice small things about her, too. She was always checking her phone, often with a serious look before putting it away quickly. Sometimes she seemed distracted, her thoughts far from where she sat. Once she got a call in the middle of their coffee, and her tone instantly shifted. Firm, controlled, almost like someone giving orders. When she hung up, she looked embarrassed. "Work?" he asked gently. "Yeah," she said, forcing a smile. "It never really ends," he nodded. "I get it. My boss calls me at midnight sometimes when a customer's car breaks down." She chuckled softly but didn't explain further. As their bond grew, so did Daniel's confusion. He couldn't quite figure out who Elena really was. She lived in an expensive part of town, always wore elegant clothes, and seemed to know things about business most people didn't. Yet she never acted superior. She laughed easily, helped an old woman cross the street one afternoon, and shared her umbrella with a stranger when it rained. She was kind, real, and yet there was something untouchable about her. One afternoon, Elena showed up at Daniel's workshop unannounced. She was wearing jeans and a simple white shirt, her hair tied back casually. Daniel was under a car, his hands greasy, when he heard her voice. "Busy as always?" He slid out from under the car, grinning. "You could say that. Didn't expect to see you here." "I was nearby," she said. "Thought I'd stop by." He wiped his hands and offered her a seat. "Well, welcome to my world." She looked around the garage, tools scattered on the workbench, an old radio playing faint music, the smell of oil and metal filling the air. "It's not fancy," she said, "but it feels alive." Daniel smiled proudly. "Yeah, every car that comes in here has a story. Some people think it's just machines, but for me it's more than that." Elena watched him as he spoke, her eyes soft. "You really love what you do, don't you?" He nodded. "It's not just work. It's part of who I am." For a while she sat quietly, watching him fix an old sedan. The way he focused, his hands steady, his movements careful, it fascinated her. He wasn't just fixing a car. He was mending something invisible, too. Maybe that's what drew her to him. In his world, things were simple, honest. Not like hers, filled with meetings, deadlines, and people who smiled only when they needed something. When he finished, she clapped softly. "You make it look easy." "It's not," he said, laughing. "But I've been doing it long enough to make it seem that way." "Would you ever want to do something else?" He shook his head. "Not really. Maybe I'd like to run my own place someday, but I wouldn't trade this life for a suit in an office." She smiled faintly. "You might change your mind if you saw my office." "Doubt it," he said with a grin. "I'd probably just fix your chair instead." They both laughed. When she left that day, Daniel felt something shift between them. It wasn't just friendship anymore. There was something deeper forming, something that scared him a little. That night, he couldn't sleep. He thought about her laugh, her eyes, the way she looked at him when he spoke. He didn't want to fall for her, not really. She was different, out of reach. But his heart didn't listen. The next day, Elena called him out of the blue. "Can you meet me tonight?" she asked. "Of course," he said. "Where?" "Anywhere. Somewhere quiet." They met at the park near the small bridge over the river. The evening air was cool, the city lights reflecting on the water. Elena looked tired, almost troubled. "Rough day?" he asked. "You could say that," she replied softly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living two lives." Daniel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Never mind." "It's complicated," he nodded slowly. "I won't push." They stood there in silence for a while, the sound of water filling the space between their words. Finally, she turned to him. "Do you ever feel like you don't belong in the life you're living?" He thought about it. "Yeah, sometimes, but I think we end up where we're needed, even if it's not where we plan to be." She smiled sadly. "You really believe that?" "I do." For a moment, her eyes glistened as if she might cry, but she blinked it away quickly. "You always know what to say." "I just say what I feel," he said quietly. Then, without thinking, he reached out and gently took her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly, and he held them until they steadied. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For being real. They stood there until the night deepened around them, saying nothing more. When Daniel got home that night, he felt both happy and confused. He didn't know what was going on in her world, but he wanted to be part of it. Whatever burden she carried, he wished he could share it. What he didn't know was that Elena's secret world was about to collide with his. Because while Daniel thought she was just another working woman trying to make ends meet, Elena was juggling responsibilities that could change lives. Her company was on the brink of a major project launch, and the pressure was breaking her. Everyone around her wanted something: money, influence, favor, but no one wanted her for who she truly was. Except Daniel, and that was exactly why she couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. That night, Elena sat alone in her penthouse apartment staring at the city lights. Her phone buzzed with unread messages, reminders, and meeting alerts, but she ignored them all. On the coffee table sat Daniel's jacket, the one he'd given her weeks ago in the rain. She ran her fingers over it, smiling faintly. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Maybe, she thought, real love doesn't start with perfection. Maybe it starts with kindness, just like it did that day at the bus stop. Days passed and life went on quietly for both Daniel and Elena, though neither of them could stop thinking about the other. The bond between them had grown naturally, like sunlight creeping through the cracks of a closed window. Gentle, steady, and hard to ignore. Daniel found himself smiling more often, even during the dullest hours at work. His friends at the garage noticed. One of them, an older man named Tony, teased him constantly. "Who's got you walking around with that grin, huh?" Tony asked one morning, wiping his hands on a greasy cloth. Daniel laughed it off. "No one, just a good week, I guess," Tony smirked. "Sure, a good week doesn't make a man hum love songs while changing tires." Daniel just shook his head, pretending not to hear. But deep down, he knew Tony was right. There was someone, Elena. She was different from anyone he'd ever met. Elena, on the other hand, was struggling to balance her two worlds. At her company, she was a leader everyone respected. Confident, assertive, the kind of woman people listened to when she entered a room. Yet outside that glass tower, she just wanted to be Elena, the woman who could sit in a small cafe, laugh about silly things, and forget the weight of her title. Her assistant, Nora, often worried about her. "You've been distracted lately," she said during a meeting one morning. "Everything okay?" Elena forced a smile. "Yes, just tired. Long hours." But the truth was far more complicated. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. His kindness, his sincerity, the way he looked at her as if she was just another person, not someone important. That feeling was rare, and it scared her because she didn't want to lose it. One Friday evening, she called him. Her voice sounded soft through the phone. "Are you free tonight?" Daniel looked at the half-finished car engine in front of him. "I can be." "What's up? I just need to get out. Walk somewhere." "Can you meet me at the park?" He smiled. "Give me 20 minutes. When he arrived, she was sitting on a bench near the fountain staring at the water. The air was cool, the city lights dancing on the surface of the pond. "You okay?" he asked gently, sitting beside her. She took a deep breath. "Work's been crazy. I feel like I'm running on empty." "Then you need a break," he said. "Forget work for a while. Just breathe," she smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he admitted. "But sometimes easy things start with small choices. Like this one. Sitting here instead of being in an office." She turned to him, her eyes soft. "You always know what to say," he chuckled. "I just say what I'd want someone to tell me." For a long time they sat in silence, the sound of the city fading into the background. Then Elena looked at him and said quietly, "You make my life feel normal again." Daniel didn't know what to say. He simply smiled and said, "Then I'll try not to ruin that." They laughed, but beneath her smile, Elena felt a growing ache. She knew she couldn't keep her secret forever. Sooner or later, Daniel would find out who she really was, and she didn't know if he would forgive her for hiding it. The following week, things at her company intensified. Her team was preparing for a major product launch, and the media had begun buzzing about it. Her name started appearing in newspapers and online articles again. Elena Cruz, the youngest female CEO to lead a multi-million-dollar merger. She didn't pay much attention to the headlines anymore, but she worried Daniel might stumble upon them. She told herself she'd explain everything to him before that happened. But time kept slipping away. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel decided to surprise her. He stopped by a small flower shop after work, picking out a simple bouquet of daisies. The kind of flowers that felt real, not showy. He remembered how she once said daisies reminded her of her childhood garden. He took the bus to her neighborhood, feeling nervous but excited. When he reached the tall glass building where she lived, his excitement faltered. The place looked far too expensive. Marble floors, uniformed doormen, and a shiny nameplate at the front that read Cruise Towers. For a moment, he thought he had the wrong place. He took a deep breath and asked the guard at the desk, "Excuse me, does Elena live here?" The guard nodded politely. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" No, I'm just a friend," Daniel said awkwardly. The guard looked hesitant. "I'll have to check with her office." "Office?" Daniel repeated, confused. The man picked up the phone and made a quick call. After a moment, he nodded. "You can take the elevator to the top floor." Daniel's heart pounded as he stepped into the elevator. Each floor that passed made him more uneasy. Top floor office, what did that mean? When the doors opened, he stepped into a hallway lined with glass walls. Through one of them, he saw her, Elena, sitting behind a large desk talking to two men in suits. Her posture was different, confident, commanding. She looked like someone else entirely. He froze. One of the men left and Elena glanced up, her expression softening when she saw him. "Daniel?" she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to surprise you," he said, his voice quiet. "Didn't know I'd walk into this." She stood up quickly, walking toward him. "Daniel, I can explain." He glanced around the room. The sleek furniture, the city skyline visible through the glass, her name engraved on a plaque. Elena Cruz, Chief Executive Officer. "So this is your job?" he asked slowly. She nodded, nervous. "Yes, I wanted to tell you, but you didn't," he said, cutting her off gently. "You let me think you were just one of us." "It wasn't like that," she said softly. "I just wanted you to see me for who I am, not what I have." He let out a small laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. "Well, I guess you got what you wanted. I saw you. I liked you. And now I don't even know who you are." Her eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, please don't say that. Everything between us was real." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Maybe. But it's hard to believe when everything else was a lie." He placed the bouquet of daisies on her desk and walked out. Elena stood there, frozen, watching him go. She didn't even move until the elevator doors closed. Then she sat down, her hands trembling. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He replayed every moment they had shared, every smile, every word, and wondered if any of it had been true. He wasn't angry that she was rich or powerful. He was hurt that she hadn't trusted him enough to be honest. At the same time, he couldn't shake the image of her eyes when he left. Sad, desperate, full of regret. He knew she hadn't meant to hurt him, but the truth still stung. Days passed without a word between them. Elena tried calling, texting, even showing up at his workshop, but Daniel kept his distance. He told himself he needed time, but deep down he missed her more than he wanted to admit. One evening, as he was locking up the garage, he saw her car parked across the street. She stepped out wearing a simple coat, her face pale under the streetlight. "Daniel," she said softly, walking toward him. He sighed. "Elena, you don't have to—" "I do," she interrupted. "Please, just let me talk." He crossed his arms, but nodded for her to continue. "I never meant to lie to you," she said, her voice trembling. I wanted to feel normal. Every day people treat me like a title, not a person. With you, it was different. You saw me. You talked to me like I mattered, not like my job mattered." He looked at her, torn between anger and compassion. "You could have told me. I wouldn't have treated you differently." "I wanted to believe that," she whispered. "But I was scared. I didn't want to lose what we had." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not mad that you're successful, Elena. I'm mad that you thought you had to hide it. You say I saw you, but you didn't give me the chance to see all of you." She looked down, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're right. I messed up. But please don't walk away because of this." He sighed heavily, the tension in his shoulders softening. "I just need time. I don't know how to fit into your world. Then let me come into yours, she said quietly. I don't care about worlds or status. I care about you. He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, I wish it were that simple. She took a step closer, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe it can be if we both try. He didn't answer. He just looked away, unable to meet her eyes. After a moment, she nodded, accepting his silence as his answer, and walked back to her car. When she drove away, Daniel felt a hollow ache in his chest. He wanted to run after her, tell her he forgave her, that he still cared. But something inside held him back, under pride, fear, confusion. He wasn't sure. That night, he sat on his couch, staring at the small bouquet of dried daisies on the table, the ones he'd given her that day. He had picked them up from her office when he left, though he didn't know why. Maybe because even after everything, a part of him still believed in what they had. At the same time, Elena sat alone in her penthouse, staring at her phone. Her world looked the same. Success, meetings, luxury. But none of it felt alive without him. She thought about calling again, but didn't. Instead, she whispered to herself, if he comes back, I'll never hide anything again. The city outside sparkled as if nothing had changed. But inside two hearts, everything had. For the first time, both of them realized that love wasn't just about meeting someone who makes you happy. It was about truth, trust, and the courage to be seen completely. Flaws, fears, and all. Neither of them knew it yet, but fate wasn't done with them. Sometimes love needs to break before it learns how to last. And for Daniel and Elena, the story was only halfway told. Weeks passed after that night when Elena and Daniel had last spoken. The city kept moving, people kept rushing, cars kept honking, and life for everyone else went on as if nothing had changed. But for the two of them, the silence between them was louder than any noise. Daniel threw himself into work. The garage became his escape. He worked long hours, fixing cars until his hands hurt and his back ached. He thought that if he stayed busy enough, he wouldn't think about her. But he did. Every day. Every night. Her voice, her laugh, the way she looked at him when she was trying to hide her sadness. It all came back to him no matter how hard he tried to push it away. Sometimes, he caught himself looking at the cafe across the street where they used to meet. He'd imagine her sitting there with her cup of coffee, smiling at him as she waved him over. But when he blinked, she was never there. Tony, his co-worker, noticed. You're quieter these days, he said one afternoon. Daniel shrugged. Just tired. Tony gave him a long look. You're not tired. You're heartbroken. Daniel laughed softly. Maybe a little of both. Tony clapped him on the shoulder. If it's meant to be, she'll come back. If not, life has a way of bringing better things. Daniel nodded, but deep down he didn't believe it. He didn't want better things, he just wanted Elena. Elena, meanwhile, was struggling to keep herself together. The company was thriving. The new product launch was a success, and her face was everywhere. Magazines, interviews, news segments. People congratulated her. Investors celebrated her, and her name became a symbol of achievement. But none of it felt like success. Every night when she came home to her empty apartment, she'd drop her bag on the couch and stare out the window. The city lights looked beautiful, but they made her feel lonely. She missed the way Daniel's world had felt. Simple, genuine, warm. Her assistant Nora noticed her mood. You've been off lately, she said one morning during a board meeting break. Is everything okay? Elena smiled faintly. Just thinking about things. Nora gave a kind look. You work too hard. You should take a few days off. Elena nodded, but she knew it wasn't work that made her feel this way. It was the emptiness Daniel had left behind. One evening, while driving home from another long day, Elena passed by the street where Daniel's garage was located. She slowed down as she saw the faint glow from inside. The door half open, Daniel bent over a car, focused as always. For a few seconds, she just watched him, her chest tightening. Then she parked across the street. She sat there for a while, unsure what to do. Finally, she took a deep breath, got out, and crossed the street. When Daniel looked up and saw her, his hands froze mid-movement. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The smell of oil filled the air, and the radio played softly in the background. Elena, he said quietly. Hi, she said, her voice gentle. I didn't mean to interrupt. He wiped his hands on a rag, his expression unreadable. You're not interrupting. She stepped closer. You look tired. He gave a small shrug. Comes with the job. I've missed you, she said suddenly, her voice cracking slightly. Daniel didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, his eyes full of conflicting emotions. Why are you here, Elena? Because I can't pretend anymore, she said softly. I thought maybe time would make it easier, but it didn't. I still think about you every single day. Daniel took a deep breath. You hurt me, he said. Not because of what you do or how much money you have. You hurt me because you didn't trust me enough to be honest. Tears welled in her eyes. I know, I was scared. I didn't want to lose what we had. He shook his head slowly. You lost it anyway. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Then let me try to make it right. He looked away. You can't buy your way into my life, Elena. Her eyes widened in pain. I'm not trying to buy anything. I just want to fix what I broke. He sighed. You can't fix people the way you fix companies. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then she whispered, I'm not leaving until you believe I'm sorry. He looked at her again. There was sincerity in her eyes, the kind that words couldn't fake. For a brief second, he saw the same woman he'd met at the bus stop, the one with wet hair and a soft smile who thanked him like he'd done something extraordinary by offering a few dollars. He put down the rag and walked toward her. Why me, Elena? You could be with anyone. Why me? She smiled faintly through her tears. Because you saw me when no one else did. Because with you I wasn't a CEO, something inside Daniel softened. He wanted to stay angry, but her voice, her eyes, her honesty, it broke through every wall he'd built. Still, he wasn't ready to forgive her completely. I need time, he said quietly. I'll wait, she whispered. And she did. Over the next few days, Elena stopped by the garage often, but not to talk. Sometimes she'd bring lunch for everyone. Other times she'd just sit quietly, watching Daniel work from a distance. She didn't try to force anything. She just showed up. Slowly, Daniel started to lower his guard. One morning, she found him fixing a car that belonged to a single mother who couldn't afford the repair bill. When she offered to help, Daniel refused. She's already having a hard time, he said. I'll make it work somehow. Later that day, when he wasn't looking, Elena slipped an envelope of cash under the woman's windshield wiper. When Daniel discovered it, he confronted her. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, she replied softly. But I wanted to. He sighed, torn between frustration and admiration. You don't make this easy, you know. I'm not trying to make it easy, she said. I'm trying to make it right. Something in her tone disarmed him. That evening, when everyone had left, he offered her a cup of coffee from the small machine in the corner. It's terrible coffee, he warned. She smiled. I'll risk it. They sat side by side, sipping in silence. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel awkward. It felt peaceful. You really think we could start over? Daniel asked quietly. I don't know, she said honestly. But I want to try. Even if it means taking it slow. Even if it means you never forgive me completely. He looked at her and saw the sincerity in her eyes. You're different from the woman I thought I knew. I'm still her, she said softly. Just trying to be better. That night, when she left, he walked her to her car. The air was cool and the stars peeked faintly through the city haze. Good night, Daniel, she said. Good night, Elena, he replied. He watched her drive away, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time, he felt hope again. Over the next few weeks, their friendship slowly rebuilt itself. They talked again, laughed again, and sometimes shared quiet dinners after work. Elena never mentioned her company or her wealth. Daniel never treated her differently. They just existed in a space where both could be themselves. One afternoon, she brought him to a small piece of land on the edge of town. It was old and abandoned, filled with rusted tools and broken fences. What is this place? Daniel asked. She smiled nervously. A gift, or maybe an opportunity, he frowned. Elena, wait, she said quickly. Before you say anything, hear me out. I know you've always dreamed of opening your own garage. I found this place for you. I'll help you fix it up. You can pay me back slowly over time. He shook his head. I can't accept that. You can, she said gently. And you will. Because you deserve it, Daniel. You've spent your whole life helping people. Let someone help you for once. He stared at her, speechless. Her voice wasn't proud or pitying. It was simply kind. Finally, he said quietly, you really don't give up, do you? Not when it matters, she said. He laughed softly. You're impossible. Maybe, but you like that about me, she teased. He smiled. Maybe I do. Together they started working on the old garage. Every weekend they painted, repaired, and rebuilt it. Elena showed up in jeans and sneakers, her hair tied back, helping with whatever needed doing. She wasn't afraid of getting dirty, and Daniel couldn't help but admire her more each day. By the time the new sign went up, Honest Hands Auto Repair, Daniel felt a deep sense of pride. Not just because of the garage, but because of what they had rebuilt together. One evening, as the sun set behind the building, he turned to her. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For believing in me, even when I didn't believe in us. She smiled, her eyes shining. I never stopped believing in you. He hesitated, then took her hand. This time she didn't tremble. I don't know where this will go, he said, but I want to find out, with you. She squeezed his hand gently. That's all I ever wanted. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood there together, surrounded by the scent of paint and fresh hope. The road that had once divided them now seemed like a bridge leading to something new. It hadn't been easy. It had taken heartbreak, truth, and patience. But sometimes love isn't about perfection. It's about two people choosing to stay when leaving would be simpler. And for Daniel and Elena, staying was exactly what love meant. Months passed, and the new garage began to take shape, not just as a business, but as a reflection of everything Daniel and Elena had gone through together. The sign out front gleamed under the morning sun, and people from nearby neighborhoods started to recognize the place. They came not only because the service was good, but because of how Daniel treated them. He greeted everyone with kindness, never overcharged, and always had a genuine smile. Elena often spent her weekends there, still wearing those worn-out sneakers that Daniel once joked about. She'd bring sandwiches and coffee for everyone and sometimes help with the paperwork. She never acted like a boss, even though everyone knew she owned more than most people could imagine. Around the garage, she was just Elena, the woman who cared, who laughed, who worked alongside everyone else. Daniel had grown too. The bitterness that once sat heavy in his heart had faded. In its place was something softer, steadier, gratitude. He'd learned that love wasn't about pride or power. It was about showing up every day, even when things got hard. One afternoon, Elena came to the garage with a stack of papers and a nervous smile. I have something to show you, she said. Daniel looked up from under the hood of a car. What's that? She handed him the folder. Inside were documents, blueprints, sketches, and business plans. He frowned in confusion. What is all this? It's your expansion plan, she said. You told me once you wanted to teach young people about cars, about mechanics, so they could learn a trade. I've been working on a proposal for a small training center next to the garage. We could take in apprentices, maybe even kids who don't have many chances in life. Daniel stared at her, speechless. You've been planning this? She nodded. For a while now. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure it could work. He flipped through the pages, his hands trembling slightly. This is incredible. Elena, I don't even know what to say. Say you'll think about it, she said softly. I don't want to push you, but I think you'd make a great teacher. He smiled, a bit overwhelmed. You really believe in me that much? She looked at him with warmth. Always have. That evening, after everyone left, Daniel sat on the workbench and stared at the blueprints again. He thought about how far he'd come, from the rainy day when he met her to this moment now. He never would have guessed that a simple act of kindness could change his entire life. When Elena came back to lock up, he turned to her. Let's do it, he said, her face lit up. Really? Yeah, he said with a smile. Let's make it happen. They spent the next few months working on the project together. It wasn't easy. There were challenges, delays, and endless meetings. But through it all, they stayed side by side, encouraging each other. Every time Daniel felt overwhelmed, Elena reminded him why they started. Every time Elena felt tired, Daniel reminded her that what they were building mattered. The training center finally opened in spring. The first batch of students came from different backgrounds, some from tough neighborhoods, others fresh out of school without direction. Daniel taught them not only how to fix cars, but how to fix mistakes, how to try again when things went wrong. One of the students, a shy boy named Leo, reminded Daniel of himself. One afternoon, The boy accidentally dropped a heavy tool and broke a car part. He froze, waiting to be scolded. But Daniel just smiled and said, "That's how we learn. Try again." Elena watched from the doorway, her heart full. Seeing Daniel in his element, patient and kind, made her realize something. She hadn't just fallen in love with a man who helped her at a bus stop. She'd fallen in love with the way he saw the world, with hope, even when life gave him every reason not to. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the training center, she walked up to him. He was sitting on the steps, wiping his hands on a rag. "You did good today," she said softly. He smiled. "They're good kids. They just need someone to believe in them." "You believed in me once," she said. "And look where that led," he chuckled. "Yeah, it didn't turn out so bad." She sat beside him. The air was quiet, filled only with the sound of crickets and the faint hum of the city in the distance. "Daniel," she said after a long pause, "do you ever think about that day, the one at the bus stop?" "All the time," he said. "Sometimes I still can't believe it happened. If I'd walked away that day." "You didn't," she said softly, "and that made all the difference." He turned to her, his eyes gentle. "I guess everything happens for a reason." She smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe we make the reason ourselves." They sat there in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Then Daniel spoke again, his tone quiet but certain. "You know, I used to think we came from different worlds. I was afraid of not fitting into yours." She looked at him. "And now?" "Now I think we built our own world," he said. "One where both of us belong." Her eyes shimmered as she reached for his hand. "That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me." He squeezed her hand gently. "It's true." Months turned into a year, and life continued to unfold. The garage and the training center flourished. Daniel's reputation grew, not as a businessman, but as a man who genuinely cared. Elena continued to run her company, but she no longer felt the same emptiness that used to haunt her. They didn't rush things. They didn't need to. Their love had grown slowly, rooted in understanding and respect. Every morning she'd stop by the garage before heading to her office. Sometimes she'd bring coffee, sometimes just a smile, and every evening he'd walk her to her car, even if it was just for a minute. One evening after closing up, Daniel found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a letter written in Elena's neat handwriting. "Daniel, you once gave me a few dollars for the bus without thinking twice. You didn't know who I was or what I had. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. That moment changed my life. It reminded me that kindness doesn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted to tell you that everything we've built, the garage, the school, this life, it all started with that one act of kindness. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. With love, Elena." He read the letter twice, his chest tightening with emotion. When he looked up, she was standing in the doorway watching him. "Did you really mean all that?" he asked softly. She smiled. "Every word." He walked over to her, his voice quiet but full of feeling. "Then maybe it's my turn to thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For showing me that love isn't about what we have, it's about who we become together." She took a small step closer. "So what do we become now?" He smiled. "Whatever we want." He reached for her hand, and this time there was no hesitation, no distance. The world outside kept moving. The cars, the people, the noise. But for them, time seemed to slow down. That night, as they walked out of the garage side by side, the city lights glowed softly above them. The rain began to fall just like it had the day they met. Elena laughed as the drops hit her hair. "You think it's a sign?" she asked. Daniel chuckled. "Maybe it's just the universe reminding us how it all started." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then let's never forget." They stood there for a while, hand in hand, two people who had every reason to walk away from each other but chose to stay. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real, made of small moments, hard lessons, and a love that grew stronger through forgiveness. Years later, people in the neighborhood would still talk about them, the mechanic and the businesswoman who built something beautiful out of a chance encounter. And whenever someone asked Daniel how it all began, he'd smile and say, "It started with a bus fare and a little bit of kindness, because sometimes that's all it takes."